This is your government video on influencing Congress. Members of Congress are influenced by lots of outside and inside forces. A lot of times we think that members of Congress always vote with their party, and they always vote against the opposing party. But that's not necessarily true. Here are some other ways that people can influence members of Congress and get their agenda passed. Remember, members of Congress have staff, and they have staff in DC, they have staff in their home state, and every committee that they're on also has staff. Those members of the staff often are the ones who write legislation, read it, summarize it, give them arguments for and against, and they often recommend various positions on pieces of legislation or amendments that come up. So staff and having people around you that really that you trust to give you good advice is important. There's also, in addition to political parties, interest groups, various types of groups in either a single issue or a wide variety of issues. Those groups also have what's called a political action committee, which is a portion of an interest group that's allowed to donate to campaigns. So interest groups might pay lobbyists to come and talk to you to try to get you to write legislation a certain way or to add amendments to legislation. And then their PAC can also donate money to your campaign, which can also influence whether you invite them to the table to have a discussion, or it might influence whether you want to pass a bill in the way that the interest group would prefer you to. In addition to being a member of a political party, lots of members of Congress are also part of various caucuses. A caucus is just a subgroup of people that meet to discuss particular issues. So there's a Black caucus, there's a Freedom caucus, there's all different types of groups. Blue Dog Democrats are Democrats who tend to be fiscally conservative. And you can be a part of these various caucuses and meet with them on their issues as well. They're obviously members of the party. Almost everybody in Congress is a member of one of the two major parties, either Republicans or Democrats. There are a couple of elected independents, but they typically choose to caucus and meet with one of the major parties consistently. The president, of course, has huge influence on Congress. Today, presidents can use the media, they can sway voters. Citizens tend to think the president is super powerful, so the president can have their staff write legislation. They can have members of their staff work with members of Congress or the Congress member staff on legislation. And if the president is really popular, then the president might agree to do some campaign stops for you, some fundraising, take some photos with you. That might help you to win re-election. And in turn for that, you might be more graceful to the president's point of view on legislation than you would be otherwise. If presidents are not very popular, then people in their party tend to distance themselves because they don't want to be associated with the president. Campaign contributions, not just from interest groups and political action committees, wealthy donors, corporations, large groups, can also decide or help you to influence how you pass a bill or what types of amendments you might offer to bills. The media as well. One of the roles that the media plays is called a watchdog function. The media's role in a free society where we have the First Amendment, which protects journalists, their job is to check up on the government for us. They are the ones who are supposed to investigate the government, tell us of wrongdoing, tell us of corruption that's going on or violation of laws. And because of that, the media has access to government in ways that average citizens do not. So the way that the media talks about bills, the way that the media talks about members of Congress, political parties, or the president can also affect whether you want to be seen or work with members of the parties or to pass legislation. And ultimately, Congress gets a lot done by use of what's called iron triangles. An iron triangle is a group of three people. The first one is a member of Congress who is on a particular committee. Let's say that this piece of legislation is something to do with healthcare. Then somebody who is on the healthcare committee, particularly somebody important on the healthcare committee, would be part of the iron triangle. The second part is a lobbyist. A lobbyist is somebody who works for an interest group. The interest group, if it is relating to, let's say, representing insurance companies, then the lobbyist that represents insurance companies is going to want to have a close relationship to powerful people who are on the healthcare committee. And then the third person in an iron triangle is a government bureaucrat. A bureaucrat is somebody that works for a federal government agency. So if the law is to pass, then it's going to be enforced by the executive branch, probably the Health and Human Services Department. So if you have an administrator who's in charge of enforcing the law, a congressperson who's in charge of getting it passed through the committee, and you have a lobbyist who is there to make sure that you're well funded and that they can write up the law in the first place, you really only need those three people working together and having a tight relationship in order to get bills passed, regardless of what voters want. Now you're going to move on to active learning number 4. For these ones, I want you to think about Congress and its inefficiencies and when they don't work together and how they can use their powers either for or against various areas of the government. Make sure that you write these active learning answers on a piece of paper.